Welcome to The Divine Style, where we explore the sacred connection between self-love, spirituality, and your divine essence. I'm your host, Gerlinda, a psychic medium, personal stylist, and self-love coach. Today, I'm joined by my beautiful friend, Zoe Strickland, who bravely turned her grief into a gift for others after losing her son, Elliot, to suicide. Through her healing journey, she created the book To Grief with Love, a moving blend of poetry and art that speaks straight to the heart of anyone navigating loss. I'm so honored to share this space with her. Welcome to The Divine Style, Zoe.
Thank you for inviting me, Gerlinda. It's lovely to be here.
Please share with us how your book came to be.
My book is called To Grief with Love. The subtitle is A Lyrical and Pictorial Voyage Through Loss. The book is a compilation of the journals I kept that I started on day one in traumatic grief after the loss of our eldest son by suicide. Still hard to say that. For those that might be listening and need to hear that, I connect my heart up in compassion, and I'm very sorry for your loss. There is no hierarchy in grief. You know, the lens I was looking through was the lens of suicide bereavement, but it's lovely to share that my book seems to have met other people in their moment as well, and there is something specific to my type of loss, but there's a lot of universality in there. The book was never intentional. I just started writing, or mostly doodling actually. I've admired people greatly that go about their grief quietly and stoically. I've kind of felt a need to shout about mine. Started sharing my sketches and my doodles, and they seemed to meet other people, and I was encouraged to carry on sharing, and somebody said, oh, you have to get these together in a book.
I've found that it really is like a diary to grief. It's so personal and raw, and I couldn't help but cry. I mean, that's one of the aspects of grief, is crying and tears and letting things out. And I think for me, like, it took me back to when you did lose Elliot, because I was around and we were in Cairns together at that point in time, and how shocking it was for all of us, but also how you were able to open yourself up to the support that was around you. And you mentioned that in the book too, as much as you wanted to isolate and be alone, you still had many people that reached out.
I did. I was very blessed. Cairns is a special community. I felt very carried. You know, the book is called To Grief with Love. They're connected so intrinsically, grief and love. There's a lot of love in the book and a lot of love in grief. I seem to think that our soul knows how to do grief if we allow ourselves to stay soft and open-hearted and stay in the love lane. I feel it's encoded and spiraled into our ancestral wisdom and our DNA. And if you can trust that and be open to instinct and be intuitive as you navigate through, that's helpful. The way through grief is your way. I'm sharing mine.
I mean, grief is universal, like you said, and it is something that we all have to face at some time or another. Creating this book was a cathartic journey for you. Did you find that it was able to kind of heal something?
In many ways. I mean, it was passion and loss and instinct, and I just felt like I wanted to write out what I felt, so I didn't drown in it. In that early shock, my brain didn't have a department for how to process it. There was no file in my brain for that. There was no frame of reference. And so writing and doodling was a way that I could, grief self could freely roam, so I could carry on being me at some level. I also wanted to write to Elliot. I had another set of diaries that I kept for Elliot because I wanted to keep the dark shit out of his. We were so cruelly separated. I say that with no judgment to Elliot. I meant the separation felt cruel. Part of a way through grief is accepting death, however it comes. Also, I would have done everything to help him change his mind, but that wasn't to be. So we were separated, but I still felt him. The mother and child relationship, you know, they say that you carry the brain cells of your offspring, you share them, and maybe that carries on in another consciousness beyond our human consciousness. I could connect with him in that kind of liminal space through writing to him, and I still do write to him. And I write down dreams, I write down synchronicities and symbolisms which come in abundance. One of my diary entries says, Elliot, I'm going to have to get a bloody secretary. You know, if he keeps these messages so thick and fast. I know that sounds light and humorous now, but there were some very interesting events that happened very early on in my grief that I think were very pivotal.
And that's really beautiful because often when people are experiencing that early grief, sometimes it's hard for spirit to bring through those messages really early on. They do try. I know that they do because they've spoken to me and said, I sent this and I sent that and I did this, and they didn't see it. And when you look back, you might go, oh, I missed that sign. So it's so amazing that you were already open to his energy and his presence still being around, because death isn't the end.
No.
It's transition, and it's such a difficult thing to not have that physical person and have their physical arms and their physical voice. I will get choked up. It's a difficult thing to talk about, but when you're calling out to him and wanting to make a bargain, saying, I'll do anything, just let me see you again.
Yeah, that was the stages of grief. I think bargaining is one. Okay, God, I get it. I've done my learning. Just beam me up for a day, even just once, so we could sign off. Early on, actually, there was a lovely neighbour. We didn't know her that well. I was walking Chubbs and very upset, having a cry, and this was probably the second day. She came over to me, gave me a really deep hug, and she patted me on my tight heart, and she had such kind brown eyes, and she said in such a matter-of-fact way, try to relax, darling. You'll make it easier for him. You'll see it's going to be okay. That's not something you normally hear in grief, is it? You'll make it easier for him. It was kind of like a pivotal moment. Wow, it's going to be easier for him to carry on his journey, easier for him to come through. It was really like that when my energy was less dense, when my grief was a little softer, I felt him much closer, became much more open to signs and synchronicities. And I started to journal them and write them down. And I really encourage people to do that, because you second guess yourself. When you actually write them down and then you look back over the course of 2 months, it's like, this is a no-brainer.
Yeah, this afterlife is real.
And it's the juxtaposition of when you see something and when something comes in, what you were doing or what you were thinking. It's really very remarkable. You share with trepidation, because when you feel your own knowing and your own experience, it's not always helpful to palm that off on somebody else, especially if they're not feeling it. It can be actually annoying, and it can almost close the other person off to their own experience. And I had to be careful what I took in from other people as well. Even if they're seeing something or hearing, you don't really want it unless it's invited.
Yeah, like people saying he's in a better place.
Yeah, that's probably one of the worst things you can say. Yeah, at least he's at peace.
Yeah.
No, his better place was here in the bedroom next door to me. In the book I was talking about, I often write to him and ask him for answers. With regards to publishing the book, I digress a little bit, but I always felt like I tune in. Elliot's my rudder. If I feel like he'd think, oh, Mum, what the hell?
That's great.
I'm mindful of my husband and the other boys as well. And they're very supportive. I tune into spirit. He communicates to us in car registrations, tree frogs. One used to sit on my husband took to brewing, and he would sit on the brew spoon. Songs, always lyrics, really poignant times. Table numbers, there's always number 23. I mean, it's laughable. I thank him in my journal. I say, oh, thanks for that. I really appreciate it. You're so clever.
Creative ways that spirit can talk to us and can communicate to us is so clever. Even when I've done communication, I'm blown away with how they'll send information through, and it's really special what that neighbor did for you. Show you that the grief process wasn't just about you, that we have rituals in society for grief, such as a funeral, to be able to let go. But so often we struggle with that process of letting go. And the more that we're able to go through that journey, then that allows spirit to come back in, because you were open to that communication with him, because it was about both of you, not just you or not the people left behind. It's still the people who crossed over.
That came my way. It wasn't like it wasn't conscious. Without sounding cheesy, it has a lot to do with love, especially with suicide. Sometimes there's some very complicated scenarios and angst with the person and in family relationships or whatever was going on. So it's really hard ass. I feel very blessed in our family scenario. There was a lot of love and harmony. People might say, well, that's interesting. Does your son choose an exit? But that has little to do with that. I think when you're in the love lane you feel these helpful spiritual messages. The unconscious becomes conscious. There's times where there's gaps, when you're really mourning hard. That's okay too. I'm not suggesting that so people feel guilty, because they're in a really hard place and nothing's coming through. That's a normal part of grief and happens. It ebbs and flows.
Because your son did die of suicide, I think that there are those stigmas that are attached. In particular, you and I have had personal conversations around this, and that it's not in a vacuum. It's a community thing. There's like so much more that comes into how people are feeling, and it's not always like one specific thing that they didn't have enough support. Sometimes they can have all the supports in the world. It's still just a tragic choice that's made in that moment, where they've, in whatever way, shape or form, their minds aren't allowing them to cope. It's too much.
Yeah, it's very complicated, and it's a behaviour, suicide. It's a behaviour that's carried out when the perception is that in that moment there are no other solutions to whatever problems are being perceived at the time. Everybody's case is unique and different. There is one page in my book where I reference it's the lady with the boxing glove, and it did happen to me that suicide is selfish, isn't it? I don't know how you cope, and I haven't felt anger in grief, apart from that one page where I'd filled my diary with the F word, but that wasn't anger at Elliot. It was anger at the frustration of not being able to fix something. I have a background in holistic therapies and meditation teachings. I was used to kind of thinking of things as a reframe for things and a different way of doing things, but it wasn't fixable. I felt very angry, and I felt compelled to kind of share that suicide isn't selfish. It's for the self, by the self, about the self, but it's not selfish. It's like, I've been in a dark tunnel myself, kind of a hallowed moment, because I did understand how that felt, which was awful. My moment passed. There's kind of one alluring door. You're not thinking, what's so-and-so going to think? Oh, I can't do that. You're in a dream world, really, I think. It's a different zone.
And that's why I have so much compassion, because when I was young, I did make an attempt on my life, and I was in all sorts of pain, and I really couldn't see outside of where I was. And I feel like all of those judgments and all the things that people sort of put on it, for all the people that unfortunately have lost their lives, there is hundreds of thousands, probably millions of others that have had an attempt. For whatever reason, it didn't happen. I'm grateful for that, but I didn't know at the time, right? Like I didn't know, I just didn't want to be here anymore. And to get rid of the stigma and to be able to talk about it. And that's why I'm just so, like, as a friend and as, I'm so proud of you. Like, I just think, this is hard.
Yeah. We are getting better, as there's a lot more training now and kind of short courses for families and people. I think we're getting better at it. But it's complicated. People don't want to upset somebody or understand why it's not spoken about. And look, it used to be considered a crime and a sin, hence the word committed. I do always pick people up on that because, the language has changed now. We talk about dying by suicide, not committing, because that hails back to other times. I think we're getting better at it. But it's a thorny subject.
It is really thorny.
Yeah. Where do you go with regard to what's your next step when this happens? A lot of people, when they have traumatic event, come very involved in the story, in the subject. There's two ways that I needed to heal myself. One was to understand. I wanted to understand about suicide, how to talk about suicide. I wanted to connect with people that were bereaved. I spent a lot of time in chat rooms. I wanted to connect with, not in a voyeuristic way, but I just wanted to understand how people were, without suicide ideation, were coping and what they were thinking. So I needed to nurture my academic mind, but it kind of depletes my energy in an unhelpful way when I'm working in that arena. I feel a sense of beneficence and giving when I talk about grief, especially when I see how other people have positively responded to the book and sketches when words were just too wordy. And art is such a wholesome way of getting it out.
When you're in that, you can get caught in the kind of the sadness and the darkness of it, but then to be able to go, well, this is heavy, instead of calling it a bad feeling or something, but this is heavy and this feels a little bit lighter and I can manage this. Because sometimes there are no words, which is what I loved about the doodles.
The magic, I think, of the book is the doodles. Yeah, the doodles were done very hastily. They were just rapid pick up a pen and sketch. They were kind of like a download. Look, I've had a lot of imposter syndrome with regards to the marketing of my book, because I consider myself neither an author nor an artist, and yet here I am with an art book about grief. But I've moved through that. I've journeyed with that, and there's a lot of books in a lot of people's hands now, and the feedback, as well as being quite pleasant for the ego, it's wholesome and healing for many people. Doodle Lady, the reason that she touched other hearts is because sometimes there's a lot of wordiness about things, isn't there? And it's kind of unnecessary. So when I was compiling the book, obviously, I felt like I needed to perhaps add a little bit of narrative after, just to give perspective. And I added quotes in that found me at the time. I mean, I include a lot of beautiful quotes from authors and wisdom teachers. I didn't go back and add them in afterwards. They're on the page in my diary when I was doing the sketch and what I was thinking. So I've included them in that way, and they really helped me. I'm just looking at one now. It's only with the heart that we can rightly see what is essential is invisible to the eye. And that's next to a sketch that I wrote called An Angel with Their Name. And the picture of Elliot as a stick person, actually, not myself, with wings. And I wrote, when the clouds of grief part, I'm going to cry now, those we love, but physically lost to us, come to us as angels, directing us in love and compassion to tune into our higher selves, our own personal angel with their name. This I know.
It's so full of authenticity and beauty, and I love how simple, like it's not overly fluffy, and it really brings you back into the present moment.
Yeah. In grief, you're in a different state physiologically and spiritually and psychologically, and it can't cope with a lot. I'm quite a chatty lady, and I'm used to expressing myself, but writing in that moment, they were just short grief nuggets, if you like, of how I'm feeling. That's its poignancy, really, from the point of view of sharing and publishing.
I do love this in the book, that you had stages of grief, but not the regular stages of grief that people talk.
No.
Not the clinical version. I'd love you to delve into that.
I did a lot of deep diving into spiritual scripts and beautiful books written by psychotherapists that were more kind of laterally around darkness and growth. I didn't follow a lot of the conventional grief counselling books. I found them too prosaic. They were too literal and not enough sideways for me. And the stages of grief, actually, I've come full circle with that, because I do follow now David Kessler. So he was the one that coined the 6th stage of grief, finding meaning. And he did a lot of work with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was the instigator of the stages of grief. And they have been quite misinterpreted, because she never intended them to be linear. And in fact, the stages of grief that now we know, they were actually written not in the context of grief, but in the context of supporting people at end of life in hospice.
Wow.
Yeah, I've only recently read that. So when I was like, oh, stages of grief. But, with a little bit more knowledge and compassion and understanding around what they were meant for. The stages of grief are not linear. Sometimes we find it's like the weather, we have them all in one day, and you're ticking along and you're just starting to feel a bit sweeter and softer, or your grief is starting to feel a bit sweeter, and then that sketch quicksand, you're in the quicksand. It can be anything. It could be a thought or a song, or photos on your phone are one. Sometimes they can be lovely. Sometimes they trip you up, but that's how it is. It becomes less sticky, that quicksand, as you go along. But so I write, I deliberately avoided reading about the stages of grief, opting for my own authentic experience, and I do encourage that. But if I was asked to write them down, the first stage was coping with the first time you have to go and do a supermarket shop. Your world's fallen apart, and you have to go and get groceries. Crazy. Being open to possibility and wonder and awe and maybe. So it starts with the kind of belief, hope, which becomes, from my point of view, that became experiential and knowing. The hope and the belief and the faith is a good starting point. So coping, opening, learning. Everybody says they learn so much through grief. That's really annoying to hear in early grief. I don't want to learn. I just want him back. My next karmic wheel, I'll learn. Right now, I'll stay as unwoke as you like. I just want him there. You do learn if you lean in and attending and befriending. I had a lot of psychotherapy and had a beautiful therapist. I think if you don't, it waits for you. Growing, and you grow through the learning, finding meaning, that comes later. And I added divinity because the spiritual, where psychology and spirituality intersect, is a really sweet spot. And that's not mentioned, is it, in the classic stages of grief? And yet Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and it's a very spiritual person. But, you know, as soon as you go there, it kind of puts you in a pigeonhole, doesn't it? It's like, oh, they're spiritual people, or oh. And you might not feel that.
That's
as well.
true, especially at the time. That can come later when you're sort of in the depths of it, which, like I said, you were very blessed to have that, you know, instant connection.
You know, I added, you know, perhaps divinity starts that list and ends it. Finding meaning's an interesting one, isn't it? I think that comes much later. This is my 7th year without Elliot. Publishing the book and sharing the book is giving meaning to my grief in a way I could never have imagined.
How has your relationship with love changed?
That was something I was thinking about as well. And I'd like to share that, like, over the last 3 or 4 nights, I've had what I call 3 a.m. downloads.
Oh, I love those. That is definitely the God's hour.
Yeah, I have my diary and my pen next to my bed. I'm not reinventing the wheel here. It's not rocket science. Other people have said this. But I wrote down love and grief are the same thing. Just like love needs looking after for longevity and reciprocity. I find it hard saying that word. You know, so does grief. They're the same experience. You know, just like night and day are the same experience of the 24 hours, and it's a relationship. Yeah, grief is love. And there's a quote that comes up all the time, which annoys the bejesus out of me. You know, grief is love with nowhere to go. I hate that.
Tell me why you hate it. What is it about it?
It's like, oh, it feels like very blocked. You've got all this love, and boom, it's got nowhere to go. It's got everywhere to go.
Oh, yeah.
You can go out to the people that you run into. You know, when you share your story, the amount of people that have opened up and shared their story with me. It can go to your family and your children and your husband and your dog, and it can go to yourself, and it can go to the person you've lost. It's I find that expression really annoying, and I comment on it a lot on people's posts.
It sounds like it's actually like missing a start bit, right? Like blocked grief is love with nowhere to go. Like grief has everywhere to go.
Yeah, I still feel like I'm in a relationship with Elliot.
Yeah, you are.
And my mum, it's different grief. Mum passed 2 years ago. She moves my glasses around.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, I know.
That's cheeky.
I haven't felt my mum in that physical way. I felt her around. She was in a lot of emotional pain. She didn't want to pass, and I feel like wherever she is, she's in soul school, kind of coming to terms with that.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel there's a soul school. I've seen it in dreams, actually.
Yes.
She herself has moved into acceptance, and so she comes in cheeky ways. She's very cheeky.
It's so beautiful that you've been able to cultivate a relationship with your son on the other side and your mum, and trust that it is true. From a spiritual perspective, how have you found that has helped in your grief journey, having that connection?
It's helped with the healing process. It's helped me manage. It's helped me carry on day to day, to keep that love in my heart and feel that love. Other people get that from religion and belief, which I think we do need, that sense of wonder and awe, that feeling that they were greater than the sum of our parts. I think we need that. We might need that, but we don't always experience it. We find it when we're more in the slow lane, I find, when we're sitting around a fire or we're gazing up at stars.
I have had an absolute pleasure sharing in grief with you today. Can you please let everybody know where they can get their hands on this beautiful coffee table book to be able to share and connect in such a beautiful way?
They can buy it from my website, which is www.zoestricklandpublishing.com.
Much love to you. Thank you so much, Zoe.
Thank you so much, Gerlinda. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to The Divine Style. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please hit the like and follow or subscribe button. All of those go a long way to helping us get more reach and share our beautiful message with the world.